Εγώ τώρα από πλευράς μου έχω ξεκινήσει το stream, δεν ξέρω τι έχουν κάνει στο κομμάτι του restream. Απλά ενημερώνω.
Recording in progress.
Hello, all of you. Clarita. Ναι. Έχετε κλειστό το μικρόφωνο.
Μόνο εμείς είμαστε ανοιχτοί. Και ο Σβέν. Hello, Σβέν.
Okay.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear liberal friends, dear friends across Europe, we welcome you to this event, this online panel discussion. My name is Athanasios Gramenos and I am the country coordinator for the ALDE individual members for Greece. And we are here to discuss a very, very important issue that is related, of course, with the liberal values, with democracy, and with the smooth function of our political system. And this is the freedom of the press and the state of media freedom in Europe, given that in many countries we see violation of this freedom, or we see other incidents, other facts that make us either alarmed or warned, because when the freedom of expression and the freedom of the press is threatened, also democracy is threatened. I'm very happy to welcome here today some people that they are real experts on the field. But before I start presenting you them, I want to share with you our concerns here from Greece, the ALDE individual members from Greece, about the situation that is going on in Ukraine. We stand with the people of Ukraine in this fight that they give for their freedom and for their territorial integrity. We all stand united. We believe in international law. We know that the post-World War II order has provided all of us with certain legal tools to sort out all the disputes we have, and war should always be condemned. Conflict is unacceptable in Europe and should be unacceptable in the new world order, in this liberal world order that we all want and we aspire to build. So I now come back to our topic, and I want to present you our panelists. First of all, I start with Ms. Irina Joveva. She is an MEP with ALDE, a member of the European Parliament. She is also a member of the Culture Committee and a former member as a journalist of the Slovenian Press Agency. Welcome, Ms. Joveva. Thank you for being here. Then we have Professor George Plios, who is the head of Communications and Media School at the University of Athens, and he is also a member of the Council of the National Council of Broadcasting of Greece. He's an expert. He's learned internationally, a very well-known academic, and he is also watching all the monitors of media freedom in the world. So, Professor Plios, welcome, and thank you for being here. Next, Professor Vlasis Vlasidis, who is a faculty member in the School of Balkan, Slavic and Oriental Studies. He is an expert in history, communication and media in the Balkans. He is also watching closely what happens in the Balkan countries. He has a lot of publications relating media and social media trends. Thank you, Professor Vlasidis, for being with us. And last but not least, my colleague Sven Gossel, member of ALDE steering committee, who is with us from Germany, a very known liberal whose contribution is priceless. And he will help me, especially when it comes to conclusions and summaries about what will be discussed. Thank you, Sven, for being with us here.
Thank you.
I would like to make a first short round. In less than a minute, I would like to have a first snap comment about the state of media freedom in Europe from all of you. So with the same way, I would like to begin with Ms. Joveva and take your first comments.
Thank you very much, first of all, for having me here. I think this debate on media freedom is very, very, very timely. And I really hope I will be able to contribute some thoughts for a fruitful discussion. I think the situation is very worrying. Also in Europe, we have, I can say, more and more member states of the European Union that are having some problems, some issues. Actually, the leaders of those states are having issues with the understanding of the media freedom. There's, we all know Poland, there's Hungary, but there's also, unfortunately, my country, Slovenia. So I will talk about that a little bit more. Also, I will be speaking about the situation in Ukraine and the information war, which is also important concerning the media freedom. So I think we have a lot to not only talk about, but a lot of things to do because it's getting more and more dangerous. So we have to do everything that we can to cope with this and to make things better.
Thank you very much. Professor Plios, what about
Yes, first of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation to participate in this discussion today. I would like to say that it's a very strange day to speak about press freedom, press and media freedom, because you know that head of the EU declared that 2 Russian media banned from EU, which makes things much worse than they were before. However, I would like to agree with Irena that the situation across Europe, if not across the world, regarding the press and media freedom is worsening. Coronavirus is just, lockdown was just a symptom, not the cause of this process. It was just a way to this trend to go out. We have to somehow first document all the violations taking place in various countries, the forms of these violations, the people who are behind these violations, and the means which they have to violate the press freedom in their countries, but not only in their countries. And after that, we have to invent new institutional means in order to cope with this. This is a very harsh work we have to do during the next years, and we need the help of many people from the universities or other institutions in order, of course, unions, journalist unions, and other institutional means to somehow improve the situation. That is for the beginning. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you. Professor Vlasidis.
Thank you very much. I totally agree with Mrs. Joveva and Professor Plios. I agree with the thesis that the situation is getting worse, and the freedom of press and expression drops significantly in most of the European countries. I will focus in specific countries in the Balkans, in Serbia, Bulgaria, Croatia, Albania, Greece, and Turkey, and where the level of journalism is getting worse, but the suppression of the free speech and free expression is getting worse and worse from day to day. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sven, what is your view now that we see many countries are facing similar problems, although even the more progressed ones?
Well, I'm trying to remember all these lives of journalists that had, were basically attributed to the situation, and I'd like to remind you of the killing of journalists in Slovakia on a research for better transparency. We had a similar situation in Malta. I do remember that there was even a journalist in Greece that was killed on an open street a few years ago. And I would also like
last
to
year.
And I would also like to remind you about a criminal inspector that was doing research in the Netherlands and was killed almost mafia-like right on the street. So all of that, I guess, is not so much just about journalism. It's about the fact that governments intend to hide certain topics, and that this kind of hidden activities are subject to research that the society, democratic societies, have the right to be informed about. And I guess that's where the critical issue is, and we have to mitigate that. So that's my main concern here.
Okay, thank you for this first comment. I would like to go back to Ms. Joveva and ask her to give us some details from Central Europe, from the countries that now form this geographical area that is closer to Brussels, of course, but still we see a lot of things that should be fixed. So what is the perception coming, first of all, from Slovenia and from the broader area?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody, once again. In 10 minutes, I will try to present you my views, my thoughts, and also what's happening at this moment on the European level regarding the media freedom. Firstly, as I said at the beginning, we cannot go past the situation which is happening now in Ukraine, after Russia blatantly and unprovoked attacked the sovereign nation, allegedly to topple the democratic government. This war is fought on several fronts, and the crucial aspect is actually the information war. And this is why I want to, first of all, pay my tributes to all the journalists and correspondents from around the world who had the courage to go to war, to risk their lives, to share with us the information that's happening in the fog of war now. As they are there now to give us the latest scoops, they are providing also us, so the policymakers and the general public, with indispensable insight on which the policymakers base their decisions and steer public debate. The journalists are not just on the front lines in the actual war, but are also in the front lines in the war for democracy everywhere. And every day, every era, they are the necessary condition in reproducing the democracy in the Western world. You can see on the other side, in Russia, how crucial this is in both ways. In Russia, the Putin regime has managed to completely subdue the public media, and Russian TV channels are still the main source of propaganda for the government. And this war, I think, wouldn't be possible without Russia's propaganda machine spreading fake news or disinformation on how Ukraine is subjected to Nazi forces, which must be crushed, and so on. And this wouldn't be possible in Europe, as the people armed with the truth on what is happening would topple their own government, which went insanely in war to kill brotherly nation. But there are some positive elements, which is a miscalculation from Putin, because with the technological revolution, everybody can video atrocities and spread information on social media. And even though the Russian government is doing everything to restrain it, they cannot silence the truth as efficiently as in previous times, if I may say so. And the Union has actually, just as was already mentioned, just yesterday, we banned Russia Today and Sputnik in Europe to limit their propaganda. And also Facebook and YouTube have demonetized ad revenues and removed Russian state ads from their platforms. And Thierry Breton, our new commissioner, has a talk with Netflix CEO today to do this on Netflix as well. And these three points, these three issues, which are now exemplified in this war in Ukraine, are also the main issues on media freedom in the European Union. So the first issue is how to protect or restore the independence of the media, including public media, from the positions of power. The second issue is how to protect our journalists and independent free media outlets to survive. And the third issue is how the digital revolution is changing the journalistic field and what are the challenges. So Russia's propaganda machine is radical, but there are some similar tendencies in the European Union as well, you know, where far-right populists, populist authoritarians are subduing public media. I mentioned already Hungary, Poland, also unfortunately my country, Slovenia, while oligarchs and state companies are buying the critical media outlets to share the same messages as governments. And the Polish state television only a few months ago in the information program, they used the clip from the Swedish Netflix series to spread disinformation about migrants killing Swedish people. I will say it again. They used a Netflix series, Swedish one, to say through this series that the migrants are killing Swedish people. This tells you all, I think. And these governments are not jailing the journalists as in previous eras, at least in Europe, but are using different methods such as editorial pressure, cutting funds, discrediting critical journalists, strategic lawsuits, slowly subduing the media. This happened in Hungary, Poland, now in Slovenia. The private outlets are also, I think, under severe pressure with, you know, ownership structures close to the government and even legislation in Poland that would force Discovery-owned TVN24 to sell to Polish state-owned company. Additionally, the journalists is not just dying in wars, but also on the streets in Europe, just because they have investigated someone and reported on corruption, such as already mentioned Georgios Karaivas, Daphne Galizia, Jan Kuciak. And the digital revolution has brought some positive changes since the information cannot be hidden anymore, but it also brought pressure to business models of professional media outlets because the revenues from printed newspapers are falling down. Still adopting to subscriptions models, you know, also you need, of course, resources to do the investigative journalism, and more people get their news via platforms or even free media, you know, financed also by suspicious sources and sinister actors. And the smaller nations' papers are competing with the largest ones, such as, I don't know, New York Times or Financial Times for subscriptions because of the widespread use of the English language. And these are all actually challenges that are existential to our media, and the solutions are not that easy, but we are pushing to solve these issues the best we can. Now, the current mandate in the European Parliament and the Commission is especially heavy, I think, in our dealing with these issues. Now, from the previous mandate, we have the Audiovisual Media Directive, which still isn't transposed in all member states, and the national implementation differs with good and bad examples. Then we have a copyright directive, which was supposed to give the media outlets negotiating powers with the likes of Google, Facebook, and others to fairly compensate for media contents on their platforms. But in larger countries, this scheme is more successful than in smaller ones, where also media have a worse negotiating position. Overall, we've seen some progress in France and in Australia. but internet giants are prolonging the solution, and the compensation schemes will come very short. And also we have the Digital Markets Act and the Digital Services Act that actually do not touch these issues, but they do provide the publishers and outlets with the possibility to use the same data as the internet giants. And inside of commission, trusted flaggers, national coordinators in the algorithms of these platforms, which could adapt the algorithms to promote more professional media and less propaganda posts, which would work well with properly implemented copyright directive. So there are a lot of talks of media exemption from content moderation, but as good as it would do to protect free speech, it would harm with sinister actors hiding behind this to push their propaganda. And more importantly, we are working on another set of regulations, which will be very, very crucial for the free media. I'm talking about the so-called anti-SLAPP directive, for which we are really pushing strongly in the parliament, and we've adopted a resolution on which I worked personally within the cult committee. As you know, more and more journalists are under pressure facing strategic lawsuits against public participation, when the government or parties or big corporations are trying to silence their voices and critical reporting on, corruption or abuses of public offices or something like that. Daphne Galizia, which I mentioned, actually was a victim of these slaps because she was attacked by more than 40 lawsuits across the union. And the idea of these lawsuits is to do a financial, a psychological, a legal burden, and to exhaust the journalists and the media outlets so they would stop reporting on some things, critical things. And what we are proposing now in the parliament is to have a judicial mechanism that would enable the judges to dismiss the slaps before they would come to court, that they should provide also journalists with legal and financial assistance, to train the judges and share awareness of these slaps, and also to have a mapping of all slap suits so everybody would be aware of these cases, and to adapt the legislation so defamation could not be a criminal offense, and to limit the court cases to the country where a journalist is based, therefore to stop the so-called forum shopping, where slaps could be applied in all countries, which was of course an additional burden to a journalist. Another upcoming legislation, also very, very important, is the European Media Freedom Act. Although we are still not sure what the Commission will draft, we still don't have the draft from them, but I've been in discussion for this act for, I think, a year now. And one aspect which surely will be in the legislation is that we would remove the media sector from the current competition laws, and we would have special provisions for it, which are actually necessary to block the harmful mergers and acquisition of private media. Think, for example, the already mentioned selling of TVN24 in Poland, or media in hands of urban oligarchs, or the recent Hungarian spree of buying media in Slovenia and in North Macedonia. I want to widen the scope, so this act would also encompass the public media, because they are a cornerstone of the European media, absolutely necessary for a democratic society, And again, the inspiration is drawn from Hungary and Poland, where the public media has become party media, and some sort of EU-wide safeguards are necessary, because the EU-wide solution means that when things go sour in one member states, the EU structures could restrain or limit the harm. And my personal experience is that when our Slovenian press agency, where I was working years back, our press agency was almost defaulted, because the government, the current government of Janez Janša, didn't provide legally mandated funds. And the EU couldn't do anything. So it was, a big issue, and we couldn't even provide the loans or anything. We could just say that we are worried, and that's it. So we have already EU-wide organizations for public broadcasters, for press agencies. So we just, need to give them power, to give public media powers to defend their freedom themselves. That's the main thing here. And even the harmonization of legislation and following good practices from member states would go a long way. I will finish now with just a few sentences. I want to say that the liberal democracy always has to reinvent itself, and every accomplishment from the past decades and centuries has to be fought for in every generation, again and again. Some problems reappear while new ones emerge with technological digital changes. And policymakers should be one step ahead and not one step behind. And these proposed changes, which I painted, could go a long way, but it is necessary to do it fastly and efficiently and also ambitiously. And the media freedom is not guaranteed, unfortunately, and from recent developments in the EU, it is in danger. And without independent and critical media to, raise awareness and engage the public debate, such wars can happen, and autocrats or populists will stay in their power, without any consequences. So I will finish here. I will stop here because I would really like to hear the other guests what they have to say. And thanks again for having me, and I'm really looking forward to the possible discussion.
Thank you, Ms. Joveva. I keep that freedom and democracy is not given. It's a constant fight. And when the policymakers are daring to give the fight, then we have hope and the future can be brighter. Thank you for this intervention. I want to come now to Professor Klios. Well, I will be provocative, given that in most of the indicators and of the reports that we have, either in terms of pluralism, in terms of media freedom, freedom of expression, we see that Greece, although the cradle of democracy, is not scoring very well. And Sven referred earlier to the killing, to the assassination of an investigative journalist, one of the few. We don't have many investigative journalists in Greece, unfortunately, of George Karaivas that happened last year. We also have many incidents of persecution of journalists. We have the surveillance of another journalist who was working with immigrants by the National Security Service, monitoring, so closely the journalists. What is going on? Could you provide us with some information about this?
Yeah, thank you very much for giving me the floor. I first want to mention that the tendency of worsening the press and media freedom situation is not accidental one. It's been going for several years. The pandemics is just a factor in this process which contributes to worsening the situation. And of course, now the crisis in Ukraine, the war in Ukraine. Regarding me, I consider the ban of the two Russian media as further limitation of the press and media freedom in the European continent, not as a defense, but as a worsening. But that's my view. So let me speak about Greece. In order to understand what is going on first, let me provide you some data. According to the RSF, Reporters Sans Frontières organization, that they index, last year, Greece was at the place 70 by the measurement in 2020, right? Place 70. The previous 2 years was at the place 64, which means that Greece goes bad. I presume that this year Greece will fall lower, perhaps around the place 18 or even lower. I mean higher actually. Higher means lower in the RSF measurement. This is by what the RSF say about the media and press freedom in Greece. According to the Mapping Media Freedom Organization, during last years in Greece, we have 134 serious violation of incidents of violation of press and media freedom. Last week, or pre-last, I don't remember exactly, ECPMF, the European Center for Press and Media Freedom, I was a member of the supervisory committee a few years ago, published its report for 2020. According to this report, the ECPMF report, Greece is at the eighth place in the whole European continent regarding the number of violations of press and media freedom, 22 actually. The most violations happen in Germany, let me say. 116 if I'm not wrong. But if we look from another point of view, the same data, we can observe that Greece is at the place follows after Serbia, Montenegro, Croatia, Slovenia, and Albania. Means it's after these countries. And regarding the population, Greece is a place worse than Turkey, Hungary, and Poland. These are the facts. Nobody can say something different. Nobody can dispute regarding the facts. But what is the cause about this? The cause is more or less the same like in other countries regarding the violation of press and media freedom. At the first place is what we call, political power. Most of the violations in Greece come from the political power, from the government, from the police, mostly from the police, especially physical attacks be doing from the police or other state services. And of course, by the owners, the media owners, the enterprises, right? But most of the violations come from the state or other political institutions. This is also a fact. Most of these violations come from the state. And I can speak about this for several hours. I mean, to describe you very specific situations of violation. I have more than 30 pages, a list of 30 pages with violations of this kind. In my understanding, the first reason for the violation of press and media freedom in Greece is the extreme political power that the state has regarding not only the media but many other parts in the public sphere. This is valid not only for the media; it's valid for other places in the public sphere. Along with this, the state can manipulate with the mass media companies. The state provides subsidies to the mass media, the private mass media organizations. Some people here in Greece say that there are allegations that behind several media organizations hide black economy, for example, hides black economy, and perhaps crime, and what else. So, on one hand, the extreme political power, the authority, the power, the political power has in order to cope with the media, to handle the media organization, because the state faces actually the media interferes in the media sphere by two means. First, by suppressing the journalists or chasing the journalists, and the other form is somehow to support in financial terms the media organizations, like it happened recently during the pandemics, for example. About 30 million euros were given to the media organization, to private media organizations. And this money goes not directly to the journalists or other, for example, branches in the media sphere, but directly to the media owners. So behind, a part of the authorities, the political power has in Greece, is that interweaving between the political power and the owners. This is a second reason for which leads to the violation of press and media freedom. Of course, tabloidization who favors fake news in all aspects. I can talk about several hours about fake news industry. Given the chance, let me say that Ukraine sources also publish many fake news recently. For example, the Snake Island or the bombing of building in the capital of Ukraine, Kiev, etc., etc. So all parts produce and spread fake news. This was happened in every war. All parts are doing the same thing. Nobody is innocent regarding the fake news, because what they seek is victory, and they do not pay attention by which means. So let me say also that during the pandemics in Greece, there was a kind of censorship regarding the publication of news on the pandemics. For example, journalists had to be informed every day during the pandemics, I mean, in the press conference, the Ministry of Public Health used to give every day at 6 o'clock p.m. Here in Athens. But notice that not all journalists had the right, health journalists had the right to be present in this press conference, but only few of them. Second, the journalists had not the right to put the question, text the question directly. They had to ask by proxy. They had to give the question to a person from the ministry, and the person from the ministry ask the question. And the third form of censorship during this press conference was that even there were 3 representatives of the state there, 3 different state services, the journalists had only one question to ask these 3 people, one of these 3 people. Apart of this, the government had to limit the public demonstrations, public demonstrations, gatherings in Athens, in other cities. But during the police operation, in order to deal with these manifestations, the police many times exercised physical violence against journalists or arrested journalists, for example, like Bikos. This is also registered in the press and media freedom, in the Mapping Media Freedom Organization. Or journalists had to quit their job because the owners or the owners by the directives given from political persons asked pressure on these journalists. Recently, 2 Greek journalists were shot because they published information about the so-called Novartis scandal in Greece. They published information that political persons were involved or are involved in this scandal, the Novartis scandal. And they were sued about this because they published information regarding this case. So, if you look, for example, at the Mapping Media Freedom Organization records they have, you can notice that there is a list of about 38 forms of violation of press and media freedom. In Greece, you will meet all these forms of violations. And actually, let me start from the beginning. Not only Karaivas was assassinated, but also 10 years ago, Socrates Giolias was assassinated, which means that within a period of 10 years, we have 2 assassinated journalists in Greece, many journalists that were sued, or others they were prosecuted, or they were beaten by police forces, and others, of course, were fired. So a situation is worse in Greece, And I can tell you that some people have decided to establish an organization in Greece similar to RSF in order to monitor press media freedom situation in Greece and publish data about these violations. The causes, as I already told you, lies mostly in the state, the political power, and of course in the economic power the owners they have. And don't forget other factors, for example, like the lower political interest among the population. The population here in Greece, the citizens, do not are not interested anymore about these issues. They are satisfied with entertainment, etc. Amid the crisis. Political participation is also limited. Parties or other stakeholders or civil society organizations are more weak now. So there is no balance in between the powers in the Greek society. That's the problem, I think. I don't know how we can solve the problem, but I think that we need a strong chain of strong organizations in the civil society in order to deal on one hand with the state, the political power, and on the other hand with the owners. That is my view, at least for the moment, and I'll be happy if I have the chance in the future to add more and more information about this negative trends in the Greek society and the journalism.
Thank you very much, Professor Plios. Indeed, we see now that a country that was not so suspicious for these conditions, it becomes a very hard milieu for the journalists, and indeed pluralism is the big question for Greece. And now we will leave Greece and we go northern to the Balkans. I assume that the environment is equally difficult, and I would like to give the floor to Professor Vlasidis, who is an expert in not only in the media, but also in the tensions and the trends in the social media sphere, that they reflect in a way the news and how these are circulated. So, Professor Vlasidis, how you see this situation, how you see these developments in the light of the ongoing campaign, military campaign that also Russia has deployed against Ukraine?
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation and for your good words, but I'm not an expert to all these comparing with George Plios. Okay, I will try to cover the distance between Athens and Ljubljana, or I will try. The last 2 or 3 years, we have seen that we have a limitation of the freedom of speech in several Balkan countries, such as Serbia, Montenegro, Bulgaria, Albania, Greece, of course, even in Croatia. And we have these new limits to the freedom of expression, the freedom of publication. We have several restrictions in social media, and the attitude is negative for the future. I am very sad to tell you this, but the future is not positive for me, for the most of the countries in the Balkans. We have a lot of shortages to investigation journalism due to the pandemic or the economic suppression of the media or the buyout of the media. So we have very few true independent media in Bulgaria, in Serbia, and in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and the situation is going worse and worse. several barons of the press or media entrepreneurs are buying out these independent media. They put them aside with their party media in order to become several media owners and serving their common interests with the authorities. This is a main problem in several European countries, the same in most of the Balkan countries, and of course we have the situation in Turkey with Erdogan regime, which is on another level. We have the suppression of the media from the government and the state of emergency due to the coronavirus legislation. It was an opportunity for curfews, but not only for these, but for putting several restrictions to journalists, to media owners, and sometimes in expression of different opinion and than the usual or the so-called public opinion in each country. And now, where we are getting out from the coronavirus crisis, it's very difficult, or I can't see the turning back to the status before the coronavirus. So all these state of emergency in legislation or to the relations between the state and the media has becoming a normality, and I'm not sure if we have a chance to come back to the previous situation. The economic situation of the media is getting worse, so we have lack of sources to several dependent media. The black money is a main source for many media owners in order to survive or to getting rich. So this is not a good opportunity for the expression, the free expression. And except this, we have a decline of the level of journalism. It has dropped significantly in most countries, especially in Serbia, in Montenegro, in Bulgaria. I don't have specific data for Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, and Albania. In these countries, the quality of investigating journalism has become worse and worse due to the fact of all these fake news about the coronavirus crisis, the anti-vax campaigns, and all these. And the changes and the relations between the traditional media and the social media in these countries is a normality not so acceptable as in Western or Central European countries or in Slovenia. I would like to mention that we have several attacks or call for attacks to persons that they are working on watchdogs in social media, watchdogs institutions in these countries, such as North Macedonia and Bulgaria. They discover the IDs of these persons and put them in public in order for several anti-vax or anti-coronavirus measures partisans to attack them. This was a very serious danger for all of them in Bulgaria and in North Macedonia. We have also problems for the journalists for defamation allegations. This is a specific problem in Bulgaria and in Serbia and in Greece, of course, because for different reasons. In Bulgaria, we have they have passed legislation that protects the media against these gag sweeps, but it's not this doesn't work, of course, and in Serbia there is a lack of legislation that protects the journalists of these allegations. We have also gag suites in Bulgaria, in Serbia, in North Macedonia, and in Greece. We have police harassment against journalists, local journalists and foreign correspondents in Greece, in Bulgaria, and in Turkey. And in Greece, we have the phenomenon of people that they rally or doing something else, and they are attacking the journalist or the photojournalist that they are covering their rallies. And of course, we have assassinations of the journalists or attempts in specific countries like Greece. So the situation is not normal, of course, and is getting worse and worse. But the main problem, except all these, is that we have a very strong push, let's say, of the political leaders to the traditional media in order to oust them from the public sphere. Let's say we have authoritarian state prime ministers or semi-authoritarian prime ministers that they are producing declarations in all media like gods or leaders of the past, or they behave like them. So they are traditional parliamentary leaders, but their attitudes or their behaviors are like their semi-authoritarian prime ministers. So the work of the journalist, and in order to cover the publicity and the news items and putting the agenda is getting limited and limited, and the sources are coming from authorities, let's say the government, the public companies, or huge media and entrepreneur funds in order to suppress the other voices of medias and journalists. And independent voices are from time to time are listening a lot, but usually they are covered under these actions of the supra-local powers. I would like to stop here, and if you want more information, I will give me a second chance.
Thank you, Professor Vlasidis. It was a very informative presentation, and this gives me the opportunity to turn now to Sven, who has been listening to all the three distinguished speakers that we have. Sven, it sounds that we have an alarming situation, although we are very proud for Europe and of course for the benefits of democracy that we enjoy. Still, it seems that there are some pieces missing here. How do you feel about this, especially we as liberals who are always defenders of freedom of speech. What do you see here?
Well, I'd like to thank the speakers for their time. A few remarks on your question. I guess what we'll see is obviously the outcome of a shift from classical media content towards a variety of different platforms people get information. And while it's not only has changed the channel by which we are informed about, it also changed the mechanisms, and those mechanisms are hard to deal with because all of our legal setup in the European Union specifically, but technically all over the world, is sort of made, and is still sort of made, along the lines of the mechanisms of the old classical media. And a very typical example is licensing. I think some of you mentioned that already, how Google and the media outlets are transforming their information over the internet. So those kind of mechanisms need to be re-established, probably reinvented. And it seems to me like it's quite hard, not only for the analysts like research institutes, laboratories, but also for the political scenery to adopt this. So, you know, when we talk about social media, obviously that's one of the main issues here. We have press freedom on one side, meaning everybody should, you know, be able to publish whatever he'd like. On the other hand, there's a lot of fake news that we allow to happen this way. And on the other hand, you know, everybody should be able to talk to face or to voice their opinion as they would like to, but then its misuse is misused by propaganda, right? So I think I'd like to go back to what I said in the beginning. I guess the real issue is here about transparency of governments, because there's technically two things. One is hiding information, and one is manipulating information. And I guess while for decades we were mainly talking about hiding information, because that one is much more difficult these days, because you mentioned this, all these iPhones around the world, all these Android phones around the world are allowing to publish any kind of information that you actually see while it's happening. Now, and obviously that's why there is a shift in trying to use that information that cannot be hidden anymore, and then try to manipulate that. So those kind of things need to be tackled. And I have to say, Irena, by all means that you mentioned, and was quite a lot of information that you brought, one of the typical criticisms of the European Parliament is that although the intention is right, very often the implementation is not exactly according to that what you're trying to achieve. And the best example is this licensing issue, because although it was a top priority to make sure that we clarify the role of a platform and a content provider, at the end of the day, it was lobbying by licensing and media content companies that was sort of watering down something that in the end had the right intention, but what was not well established. And then following that, there's still a filter by implementing that into the national member state laws. So technically, we have a lot of issues that we need to resolve just by implementing those directives and resolutions and law, but then by the same time making sure they're really at the grip. And I'd like to come up with one example here before I take too much time for the questionnaire. It's something that happened under the radar screen of a lot of people. We have a little town here in Germany called Passau, which is in the southeast of Bavaria. And there is a relatively well-known newspaper, and this media outlet owned more than 30 Polish newspapers until recently. Now, by an offer from a gas and oil company, which is from the network of Mr. Kaczynski, they were offered such a big amount of money that the Passau Neue Presse, PNP is the name of this outlet, has sold all these 30 newspapers to the closer network of President Kaczynski. Now, money makes the world go round. So this company was not exactly doing too well. So they took the money, but at the same time, Poland is buying information of a lot of local press outlets now that have intentionally intensified manipulating information. That's, by the way, not happening to Poland as well. I'd like to draw your attention to Mr. Murdoch buying the Wall Street Journal. And now the opinion page on the Wall Street Journal is known for being quite right-wing positioning. So all this kind of things is happening with people buying information. And my concern is that we're not talking about the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room here is, and that's my first question to Irena, would be talk about how to implement whistleblowing mechanisms here, because we know the American way to do it is not exactly right. We all remember Edward Snowden and Julian Assange, but there is something that the European Union tries to do, and we should not, as we say in Germany, throw the child out of the bath. It's something where we have to make sure that this implementation is available to journalists as well, so that neither the journalist nor the person that is actually giving information that is worthwhile to be transparent, so that they cannot be charged, or they cannot be suspended by that kind of transformation of that transparency. So all in all, I think it's the government that we have to control. So the liberal question here is how to control a government to make sure, on one hand, they are not just, they are as transparent as they can be. And on the other hand, to make sure the government can still be a government, because it's the nature of the government, obviously, to not exactly tell you everything all at once. So how to mitigate that is a critical process, but we have to have the right law all over the place to make sure the people stay informed.
Well, thank you very much. Before we continue, I'd like to inform you that Ms. Joveva had to go. She's very busy, and we thank her for finding this time slot to be with us. And also to tell you that also Mr. Lambsdorff was supposed to be here with us today, but unfortunately, due to the situation in Ukraine, he had to focus on this, and that's why he's not here with us. Following up of Sven's comment, I'd like to ask a question to all of you. My question is if size eventually matters. And that means that, as far as I understand, for smaller countries and for smaller economies, for smaller societies, it's more difficult to have big and more independent media outlets, maybe because the information market, the press market, is also smaller. But in countries that are bigger and the stakes are higher, this is more easy. This is more profitable. So is this axiom working or not? What do you think? Let's ask Professor Plios for the beginning.
Let me first ask the question here in the chat. There's a question, and if I understand correctly, the person who asks is interested to know if we should continue to have public television funded by the state. Let me say first that public television is an obligation we have according to the Treaty of Amsterdam, Article 29. So we don't have the right to abandon public television. The form of funding is a different question. Okay, there are several ways to fund the public television. For example, in Cyprus, the public television is funded by the state, for example, the budget. In Greece, you know that the people pay public television along with the electricity, for example. Okay, in Germany, it's a little bit different. So there are different forms of payment. We cannot public television is necessary, but it has to be public, indeed. Of course, there are several forms of public television. State television is a public form of television, it's public television. But there are other forms of public television. For example, the municipalities perhaps have the right to own their own television state. That's another form. Local authorities in general have, perhaps they have the right to, in Germany, for example, exists that model. So there are several forms of public television. My understanding, state television is the more weak form of public television. For example, BBC, or in a wider perspective, public service television is a different thing. And perhaps we must look at this form of television. In Germany, for example, the model of managing public television, I think, is one of the best in Europe. And perhaps this is what fits more to the Greek case, but it's quite different. I forgot your question. Mr. Grabman was trying to answer to this question of power.
It is about the size. If the economy defines also independency of the press and the media.
There is not a direct relation between the economy and the number of the media. For example, in Central and in Northern Europe, there are smaller number of media regarding to the Southern Europe. And you know that in Greece, population is much lower compared to Germany, for example. It's a matter of culture rather of politics. However, the link between the economy or the population, I mean the number of people living in the country, and population is not direct. It depends. It depends how we can issue, for example, licenses to the television stations. For example, in Norway, you know that the amount of money that an owner of a TV station has to pay to the government in order to get a license, it's extremely high. So in fact, there is no private television in Norway, for example. Okay, in Greece, the amount of money is a little bit low. We have just to inform our colleagues here, we have only 6 private nationwide television stations and 3 nationwide public television stations. This is, in my perspective, this is a very high number of television stations. In my calculation, we cannot have more than 2 or 3 private nationwide public private television stations. If you look, for example, for the income of television stations, the companies which hold the stations, this is extremely low, which means that in most cases the Greek media seeking funding in other sources, and that's what I said earlier, that there are allegations that black economy is hiding behind several media organizations here in Greece. So there is no direct link between these two, poles, and we must always seek the most rational solution to this problem. But let me say one more thing. Last, I agree with Sven that, of course, political power of the state is the problem. But we must not forget that uncontrolled companies are also a source, a serious source of violations. And most of all, that cooperation between the state and some of these private institutions is perhaps the biggest obstacle in several cases, especially in countries where, for example, bribes or other forms exist, like in Bulgaria, for example. Bulgaria is very clear example of what is going on between black economy, for example, and statesmen and state women, for example. So there's no one solution. We have to work in concrete situations to find concrete solutions.
Thank you, Professor. I want to ask Professor Vlasidis. I assume you have to go, right?
Yeah. Students waiting for me. I have exams.
Okay. Thank you for being here. I want to address one question to Professor Vlasidis. If he sees a pattern of uniqueness in the EU member states in contrast to the non-EU member states of the region with regard to the media management, to the media business in general.
The answer is not unique because in the Balkans we have several difficult processes of developing private media and preserving the status of state television or state press agencies and all these. Let's say in Romania, from the beginning, from 1992, the investments in the media sector were huge. So even in 1995, the media pool, the Pro Media company, was a huge one, and this conglomerate defines the public opinion in Romania. The situation in Serbia is different. The situation in North Macedonia is different, where the media owners were friends or colleagues with politicians, that they are in power or that they will to get the power. The situation in Bulgaria is different, where the mafia is controlling some of the media, but there are networks, information networks, let's say some local stations that they have common program in radios in order to have the size and to have the number of correspondents in order to get the information and to have enough audience in order to survive. The situation in Albania is about the same as in Bulgaria. And of course, the leaders in this model of cooperation between entrepreneurs, friends with the political leaders, is Greece. As you know very well, where this partnership was controlling the political game and formed the public agenda from the 1970s till now. And the political system is Greece, defend his status, and he was able to defend his status even against Troika and the European institutions. I believe that the European Central Bank, the IMF, and the Commission were defeated by let's say, the political elite in Greece as a whole. They have got some lessons, but they stay in power, where in other countries they stay aside. So the formation of independent media is very, very difficult in our area, and the less audience that they have and the less interest of the audience for public affairs, it's difficult for the media to stay independent.
So you need also to have active citizens to have good media, if I understand correctly.
Yeah. State television is not necessary in these countries because they used to be the mouthpieces of the political elites during the communist regime. So they not well, they have a negative image. And of course, everyone that they are getting to power is trying to control the state television. So it's a matter of the civic society to put restrictions and to preserve the independency of state television or other news sources in order to protect their sources from media owners, media barons.
I'd like to add something here, because what you just said is important, and I'd like to have one headline below this called "Information Has Value." And we're living, or we used to live over the past, say, 10, 15 years in a situation where a lot of people thought information is basically free. It means doesn't cost anything. And it was sort of a tendency where people said, you know, well, no big deal. There's a lot of people that would be advertising, and so, you know, you can finance this kind of operation. In the end, you're getting people that are financing this, and you're getting dependent on less and less people. So there's more and more conflict of interest. To have a to make people understanding that information has a value, and that transparent and balanced information has more value, is the reason why in the UK and other countries, by the way, even in the United States, they all try to find a balance between state finance media and still independent media. So I think it was done in each country a little bit different. I think the BBC in England is relatively comparable to the German setup, and both of these are very valued news outlets. If you go to the United States, you feel that NBC, ABC, and CBS, they are still private owned, so they're privately funded. However, they have a public order to inform people in a balanced way. So there's sort of a law that allows these three companies to be a little bit different than all the other private companies that exist. So long story short, I guess one of those questions here, should private media be the only one? Well, certainly not, because the risk of conflict of interest in those areas is way too large. And unfortunately, and I say this as a liberal, unfortunately, a large part of the population is unable to make the difference. And that is something that we need to worry about.
Thank you very much. I share your opinion. And I would like to go back to the opinion of Athanasios, that it's difficult to have different independent sources in countries where the capital city controls all the economic activities and social activities of the people. Let's say in Skopje, in Pristina, in Belgrade, in Tirana, the whole media companies have their headquarters in these cities, but not only the headquarters, the whole political game and the social affairs and all these are in these capital cities. So they are not comparable, all different centers, Bitola, Skoder, and other cities may have a comparable population, but they stay aside of the activities, the political and social activities. So the media cover their activities, and they put aside all other activities that they are under their monitoring. This is a problem. In Germany, in France, in Italy, in UK, there are several cities that they have their local political public sphere. In countries like these, there are no local political spheres different than that of the capital cities.
Thank you, Professor Vlasidis. As now we're reaching to the end. There is a last unanswered question from the audience. Nicholas is asking, is there a possible kind of journalist creed or ethical code of journalists that the EU and member states could set up to accredit journalists first at the EU level and worldwide to bring journalism to its better level and to higher standards? Is there something more we can do to build trust? That's a very relevant question to our topic, because as far as I know, there are many journalist unions across Europe, in almost every country. I have some experience from my research that it doesn't play sometimes so big a role if, for example, you violate the code of conduct and you are expelled from a union, you still work where you used to work. So you can serve not the code of conduct, but your personal interests in many cases, and you violate it and then you discredit your profession. So what do you think about these questions? How would you answer to Nicholas? I would like a short comment from both of you before we close this evening. Professor Vlasidis, please.
Maybe Sven, in order to put my thoughts in order.
Okay.
Okay. To my understanding, there is a sort of a private creed that exists already, but that, of course, to put this into a sort of a certification level is something that's rather difficult, because you need to govern this, and I would think that's a very difficult thing to do. So in the end, I guess, whether you find the right doctor and he's the right guy to do it, or the right lawyer because he's the right guy to do it, I guess it's pretty much to the discretion of the reader and of the watcher to make sure he finds the journalist that he trusts the most, and he's able to be identified as someone who is the one that brings the information in a digested way, so that everyone is able to make his own opinion out of that. I think it's something it's really hard to do.
Professor.
I have the same opinion. I would like to mention that in the previous decade, the EFG has made several seminars for journalists of our area in Maastricht. Most of them were well educated, but when they come back, they prefer to work like the previous years before their re-education in Maastricht. And except this, the bribery of the news media and the journalist is something very, very serious. I would like to mention that in Greece, there was a journalist, he passed away just 2 months before, Yorgos Tagas, who was the anti-government, a populist. And after his death, we discovered that he has made a huge fortune in Monaco, in several cities all over the world. So he was, let's say, a mouthpiece of the populace that was bribed by several entrepreneurs and politicians in order not to discover their issues. If you are a proper journalist and get 500 euros and not and you are suitable to your journalist ethics and get fired the first or the second time that you make an investigation, and you see the bribed colleagues to have millions or tens of millions of euros, then this is what we call a compromise, a challenge, a change. I'm not so sure. It's difficult.
So it takes also a personal code of conduct to be stable and follow the ethics. Thank you, Professor, very much for being here. I would like to ask our director to bring now Sven to the window to together to close this evening. And I would like to ask from Sven to say a few words about the other individual members, how we run, what should we expect, maybe what the members would like to hear for the next months. Is there anything you would like to say?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you to everyone who was joining for this afternoon meeting, which is not so easy for a lot of people to attend. So thank you very much to all of you who joined. Now, I'm a member of the steering committee of the ALDE individual members. Short word, the individual members are not necessarily, but very often, members of national member parties of the Liberal family in Europe. And they are contributing directly to the European political level. It means that other than by national member parties, by being a member of the individual members, you have a direct contact to European policies, as you just saw by members of the European Parliament joining. And the good news is, this is not only your national about your national members, this is about all the members of the European Parliament that are a member of the Renew Europe part of the parliamentary group. So I'd like to join. I'd like to have everybody joining. If you like, join us. The membership contribution is relatively small. I think we're talking about a minimum of 20 euros a year. So that's a very small amount, and you're really well informed and stay that among all the areas of European politics. So if you're interested, have a look at www.aldeparty.eu, and you'll find much more information about that. These kind of events are very frequent. They're usually happening on the national or on the European level. And I'm glad that we had a European level today, and you see that topics you may have in your country are typically addressed in other countries as well. And I think it's good for all of us to know that those approaches are sometimes different, but the goal is always the same. So again, thank you very much. I'd be happy to see one of you again, and have a great evening.
Thank you, Sven. Thank you, Professor Vlasidis. Thank you to everyone who helped for doing this, our colleagues in the headquarters in Brussels, Mircea, and the rest of the team. Thank you all. Again, we hope that the conflict in Ukraine will cease as soon as possible. We want to see freedom. We want to see international law prevail, not war, not weapons. We as liberals, we are here to highlight always the importance of dialogue as the key to end every conflict. So thank you, everybody. If you can find us on social media, stay tuned. We have much more to do in the future. I send you my best greetings from Athens. Good evening.